tell you this, it was very interesting, that the two largest, and I want to talk, somebody asked about interdenominational cemeteries, and I'll discuss that. But probably the two largest funerals we have ever had in our chapel, I don't know if any of you people knew the Silverman boys, Marty and Milton Silverman. They're a couple of characters, identical twins in the Portland area. I don't think they stepped foot in a shoal since their bar mitzvah, but when it was time to go, they wanted a Jewish funeral. And they had intermarried, and we buried them in a Christian cemetery. So the question becomes one, is how do we bury a Jew in a Christian cemetery? The first time we ran into this was when we had our first burial at the Veterans Cemetery, and this was an Orthodox person. So we, through one of the local rabbis, he was able to access the chief rabbi of the United States Army in Washington, D.C. And the procedure is this, is that we create what's called an Erev. An Erev is a fence. And symbolically, we take little stones and we put stones around the grave, and there's a prayer. We walk around the grave 7 times and say the prayer. And we have consecrated them to earth, and it is considered a Jewish grave. And that's how we handle doing burials in other than Jewish cemeteries.
The stones stay there?
Well, I hope they do. Yeah, I don't think anybody would pick them up. You know, they might possibly, they'll probably get buried in time, but they're there from a symbolic point of view. If you look in any cemeteries that have a section for intermarriages, you'll always see a boundary. There'll either be a row of trees, stone fence, something like that.
Does that exist in Portland? I know that's becoming common.
Yes. Actually, the conservative cemetery, Bethel, I don't think they have a specific intermarried section. Jerry, do they?
Yes, they do.
They do, okay. This is
Beyond the trees.
beyond the trees, okay. And they also have a section for cremains as well. And Mount Sinai, which is an Orthodox cemetery, has an intermarried section with a row of trees, but no burials yet. Okay. There is a section. Yeah.
Is there a cemetery in this local area?
No.
Biddeford doesn't have a cemetery?
Not a Jewish
There's no Jewish there.
I'm Jewish.
Well, where did your reference from back in history?
Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai.
They went to Portland?
Yeah, my father-in-law bought a plot years and years ago, and he got sick, and right for the family, so we're ensconced in Mount
You
Sinai.
finally get to the big city.
Yeah, I think that Mount Sinai kind of encompassed the Biddeford software.
And do you have a separate section for this community, or is it
No.
just if everyone mixed together?
Yeah, but traditionally, David, I think families years ago used to buy family plots, you know.
Yeah,
got-
that's what his father did.
Yeah, sure, you know, have a half a dozen or whatever, range next to each other.
Are you going to speak about grave markers at all, or is there a tradition?
Well, I certainly can. I can tell you, I'm going to an unveiling, actually on Sunday. Tombstones came from the time that Jacob buried Rachel. And this is the first time that burial was mentioned in the Bible, was when Jacob buried Rachel, or Rebecca. Rachel? Rachel. And what they did is used to put a pile of stones on top of the grave. And in those days, just as they have now, they had juvenile delinquents. They used to go along and brush off the stones. So every time somebody would go by a grave, or they would put a rock on it and put it up. And that's how we came to tombstones. And, you know, on tombstones, the required information on basically the tombstones really is to have the Hebrew name, the parents' Hebrew name, and the date of death. Although now you can put anything you want on it. I happened to be out on Sinai today and I kind of smiled. We were looking at some gravestones that were kind of tipping over. And there was one there and I kind of just smiled to myself. I know his first name was Ed, don't remember his last name. It said, "Father and great golfer." There's one up in Bangor. There's one up in Bangor that I always smile at. I knew the gentleman, he was a real joker. And it's got his name, the year he was born, the year he died, and it's got, "Here I am." So, you know, things change. In the conservative cemetery in Portland, they will not allow the traditional tombstones, they will only allow markers. It's all flat on the ground. Again, it comes to maintenance and I guess to conformity if that's what you want. And tombstones are very interesting. The old tombstones, I don't know, have any of you seen the old traditional European tombstones where there's porcelain pictures of the deceased? And that's interesting because you're not supposed to create an image of the deceased. Now, I've seen some tombstones where the porcelain has been scratched out by somebody. So,
Is that pile of stones that you talked about, does that happen to be where we get the, putting the stone
yes,
on it?
because you're visiting the grave.
And you're
Yeah, that's where it comes
building
from.
that.
Yeah.
So if there's a couple that are intermarried, the person who's Jewish will be able to use your services. If the person who is not Jewish,
Well, we would, that's a good question. We would handle, it's considered a mitzvah. We talked to our rabbi about that. And he agreed that if somebody wanted tahara and they weren't Jewish, that we could do it. You know, it's kind of like last rites. And so there's no issue with that. It's interesting to bring that. I can't think that we've ever done a tahara on a non-Jewish spouse. I can't say we haven't. We would do it. We wouldn't have an issue with that. Where you bury that person.
well, it's in the intermarried section
In
of
the intermarried section, you could. Yes, absolutely.
A non-denominational cemetery, have you ever run into difficulties? Either them being discriminatory against your services or...
You know, it's funny, as long as I give them a check, they don't seem to have a problem. Excuse me, I'm not trying to be, let me answer your question seriously. We've never had any problems with that. We had an interesting burial. We had a gentleman come all the way from Italy. He married a lady here in Maine, intermarried. She was not Jewish, she was. The casket was like the Ferrari of caskets. It was gorgeous. And what a time we had. This is interesting. We had to bribe, we got down late to Logan Airport to get him. And I can't remember, the customs office was closing early, and it didn't look as though we were going to be able to get him. So we had to bribe the customs agent to let him come through. And you should have seen the paperwork. It was phenomenal. The tahara was all in beautiful Hebrew, done by some Hagadisha in Milan, Italy. And we took him to a cemetery in Lock Mills, I think it's called. Something like, it was beautiful. It was way up on a hill overlooking a lake. And it was interesting. His wife, who predeceased him, there was a cross on her side. On his side, they had already inscribed his name, and there was a Jewish star. So,
Well, you had put the arrow around his site too, I think.
yes, we did.
Yeah.
There's a grave like that at Riverside Cemetery in Cape Elizabeth. One spouse is Jewish.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, put the cross and the star on it.
So, yeah, you know, assimilation, you've got to make kind of arrangements. What is it, with the marriages being so high in the Jewish tradition?